Kia ora guys and welcome back to the Black Jersey. My name's Max and as most of you guys know, I don't normally make videos straight after games, but after the All Blacks' worst defeat in history, well, I've got to make a video straight after because we are not going to win the World Cup. Yesterday I was busy scripting the introduction to a video about how the All Blacks simply are not contenders for the World Cup. I was going to go through analysis on a lot of the looping patterns we do. I was going to do some analysis on some other wee innovations, compare it to a few French tactics, a few Irish tactics, and after this, well, I don't even know if it's worth doing because the French will well and truly, have our number. Just because the All Blacks are doing well in the Rugby Championship does not mean they're contenders for the Rugby World Cup. The Rugby Championship is a competition that does not show the true, genuine ability of its competitors. The Pumas and Wallabies results are just routine annual wins for the ratio of Springbok and All Black coaches. Australia are kind of getting out of a rut right now. Los Pumas have only been a tier 1 nation for a decade. And the All Blacks, having not been given the proper warm-up ahead of the Springboks clash in Twickenham, well, they just didn't have the resources to actually deal with a full-strength team. The Siya Kolisi effect, I think, is huge. The difference I see between what happened in Mount Smart when I was there in person and today is that Siya Kolisi was not on the pitch. The mana that man has is absolutely a massive thing, and I don't think I've ever seen an effect like that since McCaw. Siya Kolisi is the South African version of Richie McCaw who plays with his heart on his sleeve. He will dominate you at the breakdown, and when you have poor discipline, well, the Springboks are going to beat you. The Springboks don't play an overly complicated game. All of their tries were scored just doing the rounds, doing what they're good at. It's something that pretty much every team has come to expect from the Springboks at this point. If you ever get down to 14 men against the Springboks, you are going to lose, and that's just the fact of the matter. Scott Barrett with the red card became just the second All Black in the history of Test rugby to get 2 red cards. After Cyril Brownlee in about 100 years ago, Colin Meads, then Sonny Bill Williams, Barrett became the 4th, and now he's got another one. Geordie's also had a red card at one point. Angus Tarvale's had a red at one point. And Scott, who is being lined up as a potential All Black captain for next year, who is going to be needed for form against the French, now he's almost definitely going to be missing the opening match of the Rugby World Cup after getting 2 yellows and the second getting upgraded to a red by the TMO. I'm not going to get angry, lose it or anything, but the fact of the matter is you cannot beat the Springboks when you're down to 14 men. Sam Cane as well, the captain, yellow carded 15 minutes in, subbed off in the second half as well. I know that Ireland's do it a lot to protect Johnny Sexton. Things like that happen. You've got to keep a good depth chart. But in instances such as this one, it's not a good look to be replacing your captain. Geordie Barrett as well, my video about him not being a centre has aged unbelievably well. He absolutely gifted that try to South Africa with that silly offload in midfield, and he's simply not used to the line speed either. South Africa don't use a rush defence, that's kind of run out of style, but by continuing to use this press defence strategy, they can still suffocate you with the one-off man, while the teammates will just take their time to close the space and just shut down your opportunities. When they have a man advantage, this is a strategy that is so much easier to execute because they no longer give you that overlap on the outside. Richie Mo'unga's missed penalty definitely hurt, but aside from Cam Roigard getting that spectacular own try, for us, getting that try, we would have been held scoreless for the first time since 1964 when we drew 0-0 with Scotland. Shocking. South Africa as well, I have no idea how they got away with this, but they had 7 forwards on the bench and just Corbus Reinach to replace Mapimpi, and yet this happened. Absolutely ridiculous. The All Blacks' tackle stats aren't even that high either. And the first half lasted 62 minutes. That's always going to take momentum out of you, while the South African ways of doing things have been around for a long time. Against 14 men, it's perfect. They may not be able to do all this stuff against a full-fledged opposition, but when playing against an opposition that is down a man, they are absolutely going to win. Scotland will have taken on a lot from this. South Africa are a tough opposition when you are down to 14 men. Speaking of that, I might as well just go through the penalty count. I know it's crazy that South Africa only had like 51% of possession in the first half and only had 14 points. But with a disciplined stat like that, for 7 penalties inside their own half, 4 in the opposition half, 2 yellow cards, 1 red card for the All Blacks, they were just never going to have the mental capacity to come back from that because they lost Barrett straight before half time. Mental toughness is a huge thing in elite sports. And I think that Joe Schmidt, though he's been a good addition for the All Blacks, he does have this habit of showing his hand there, too early before World Cups. In 2015, Ireland had a lot of injuries, and he simply didn't have the compartments to execute his strategy correctly. In 2019, they'd been using the exact same game plan for exactly 1 year. Nothing had changed. And now this time, because we haven't learned the winning passions, because we haven't learned how to win over and over and over before a World Cup, we've tried to cram in learning to win and take that streak into the World Cup. And by trying to do this, we've now shown our hand potentially again under a Joe Schmidt team before a World Cup. The other scary thing as well is this decision to take Leicester Fainga'a-Anuku to the World Cup over a 5th lock is looking more and more like a farce every single day. The only calls from Ian Foster that I disagreed with in the 33-man squad were Luke Jacobson over Hoskins Atushu, so there's no proper number 8 as a backup. Jacobson started at 6 today, and the worst thing about Jacobson being at 6 is you didn't have that third specialist jumper that you really need. No Sami Penny Finau, whereas obviously Josh Lord came off the bench. Lord will have to go back to New Zealand after this game though, because right now, due to Scott Barrett almost definitely about to be suspended, we'll have just 2 locks available to play against France in Tupou Vaa'i and Sam Whitelock, who they, I'm assuming, took off early to save from injury. After Tyra Lomax had a real nasty cut on his leg, and Ethan de Groot had a sore knee, you know, I'm pretty glad those guys didn't have any serious injuries. Lomax should be okay after the stitches, hopefully. They needed to protect Whitelock. But with Barrett down, they were never going to be able to do that successfully. They had to replace Jacobson with Vaa'i straight away when Barrett was sent off. And if Leicester Fainga'a-Anuku or Amoni Narawa, either one of them was left home in New Zealand, ideally Fainga'a-Anuku, since he signed for Toulon at the end of this season, ideally you should have taken a 5th lock. Finau definitely would have been a better option over Jacobson if they didn't want to have another number 8 cover as well. Brad Weber with Jacobson in there as well was a bad decision. If you want to take Jacobson, why not take Weber? Those are the only calls I disagreed with for this team. And how the heck is this going to work? Because the 6-2 split, maybe it's a bluff, maybe it was just an experiment before the World Cup. But if you want to have a 6-2 split, you've got Vaa'i at 4, Whitelock at 5, Jacobson at 6, Kane at 7, Savia at 8, Papali'i off the bench. Then you've got nobody in the team to wear jersey 19 and jersey number 21. They need to permanently replace Brodie Retallick, who isn't going to be fit to play against France, because we need another locking cover to be in this squad. It's just absolutely ridiculous, man, as I've said probably before. The All Blacks aren't going to win the 2023 Rugby World Cup because the way we were utterly broken by Ireland, it gave us no other choice but to, I guess, develop the risk of showing our hand before the World Cup. And man, France will now be licking their lips, especially after Sekou Makalu took advantage of the shortened Fijian line-out to score that amazing try. With only 2 jumpers on the pitch with Jacobson at 6, it's going to go to one of the locks every single time, and Sekou Makalu could absolutely score a repeat of what he did against Fiji. All Blacks fans, this is why we don't hype ourselves up too much. This country's got a bit too much of an optimistic take on rugby. We need not to be pessimistic, say everything's going to be terrible, but then if we are also optimistic, we're just setting ourselves up to be disappointed. We need to start being more realistic about our expectations of how things are going to go, because if we're just using this blind faith to expect everything's going to be a win. We're just setting ourselves up for disappointment and a hatred of the game. To genuinely enjoy the game as I do, we need to just think of everything realistically. The All Blacks, after everything that's happened under Ian Foster, this should have been expected because a lot of teams no longer fear us anymore. And the fact that we've had to use those same looping patterns as I've mentioned before, well, maybe we've shown our hand too early. We did kind of play like a team that was holding back for the World Cup as we started to get possession at the end of that first half. But after just such an onslaught from the Springboks early on, Scotland and Ireland will now understand, hold on, we've got to keep our discipline as well. Hopefully Xander Fagerson would have learned from that red card as well. I'm probably going to end the video over here, guys. Pretty depressing morning with a 35-7 defeat for the All Blacks. Our worst ever defeat is the final game we will be playing before the Rugby World Cup, and it's also our worst ever margin-wise, because our worst one was 21 points previously from 1999 and 2019, both for the Wallabies, and now right before we play France, this is what's happening. It's all well and good to take like a loss that is a sacrificial one, but with two teams sending out their full strength sides and then having your record defeat, not ideal timing. This will be the end of today's video. Absolutely depressing, gutting stuff, and I'll see you later, guys. Just remember to keep the comments civil and everything, Pretty disappointing day, and I'll see you later. Cheers.